Good afternoon. The Prime Minister Boris Johnson and the Leader of the Opposition, Sir Keir Starmer, have laid flowers together at the site of the fatal stabbing of the MP, Sir David Amess, in Essex. Sir David was killed during a constituency surgery in Leigh-on-Sea yesterday. The police have said they are treating the attack as a terrorist incident, which is potentially linked to Islamist extremism. A 25-year-old man who was arrested at the scene remains in custody, and searches have now been carried out at 2 London addresses. Our Home Affairs correspondent Dominic Castiani is at Leigh-on-Sea.
Ben, all morning local people here in Leigh-on-Sea have been coming up to this police cordon surrounding the church where Sir David Amess was stabbed and died. They've been laying flowers. All ages, all backgrounds. I've seen the very old through to young school children who met Sir David in their schools. And it's a genuine outpouring of community grief, but also led by the nation's political leaders who were here first thing this morning.
A moment of unity across the political divide. 2 leaders representing a shocked nation. This morning, Boris Johnson and the Labour leader Keir Starmer stood together on a quiet suburban road in Leigh-on-Sea, where Sir David Amess lost his life. The committed constituency MP, who at the age of 69 showed no sign of giving up his work for his community, campaigning on every issue that mattered: climate change, cycling, veterans and even local dogs.
Less than 24 hours ago, David was in his own constituency doing a local advice surgery, which is something that all MPs do, week in, week out. And of course, David, as I knew him and as we all knew him, was just a passionate advocate and a champion for Southend, this wonderful, wonderful town. And with that, of course, he was a man of the people.
I mean, the community has just been hit sideways by this. It's not just a Member of Parliament, not just the local Member of Parliament, but, you know, he really did touch people's lives in a way that most MPs don't manage to do.
Today, the Belfairs Methodist Church remains behind a cordon. Detectives still at the scene, where the suspected attacker was arrested and a knife recovered. Overnight, Scotland Yard said Sir David's death was being investigated as an act of terrorism motivated by Islamist extremism. The 25-year-old man arrested at the scene remains in custody. The security officials have told the BBC that he wasn't on MI5's main database of suspects. But there have been 2 searches overnight at addresses in London, signs of the huge operation now underway to understand what happened and more about this man's life. And nearby, shock at Sir David's constituency office, the flag at half-mast.
I don't think it's completely sunk in yet, but you only have to look at the floral tributes that are outside the constituency office here.
A man of the people, being mourned by the people, and a community and nation asking why. Dominic Castiani, BBC News, Leigh-on-Sea.
Well, a review has now begun into the security of MPs when they're meeting their constituents. It's something seen by many as central to their role. One senior MP, Tobias Elwood, has suggested that face-to-face meetings should no longer take place. Our political correspondent Peter Saul reports.
Hello there. Hello there. Nice to meet you, Dr. Fox. Nice to see you. Come on in.
Scenes like this have long been a feature of our politics. It might not look as exciting as the fierce debates we sometimes see in Parliament, but it's just as important. A chance for MPs to meet the very people they're elected to represent. Sir David Amess was far from alone in holding a constituency surgery yesterday, and his death has raised questions about whether something so fundamental in our democracy can still be safe.
Acts of this are absolutely wrong, and we cannot let that get in the way of our functioning democracy. So that is why there are measures underway right now. I've convened meetings yesterday. I've been with the Speaker of the House and with the police and our security services to make sure that all measures are being put in place for the security of MPs so that they can carry on with their duties as elected democratic members.
The Home Secretary has started a review of MPs' security. Police forces across the UK have been contacting MPs to see what support they might be able to provide. There is always a big police presence in Westminster, particularly after the terror attack of 2018. But it's impossible to provide this level of security for MPs when they're in their constituencies. Now, the MP who had to perform CPR after a police officer was fatally stabbed here says it's time to pause face-to-face constituency surgeries.
I would recommend that no MP has a direct surgery until, you can move to Zoom. There's other ways. You can actually achieve an awful lot over the telephone. You can get things moving far faster than having to wait for the surgery date as well.
The issue of protection for MPs and those around them has been on the agenda for years. And some long-serving figures believe now is the time for the parties to come together and take serious action.
It's not a question of carrying on with business as usual and just regarding this as an occupational hazard of being an MP, nor of having close security such as the Home Secretary has or the Prime Minister or the Foreign Secretary needs to have. We need to have a discussion about how we strike the balance.
Many MPs want to be as accessible as possible, especially after the pandemic. But yesterday's tragedy in Essex could force them to think twice about the way they work. Peter Saul, BBC News.
Well, let's return now to Leon C and speak to our Home Affairs correspondent Dominic Cassiani, who is there. And Dominic, as we're hearing there in Peter's report, this raises some big questions, doesn't it, about the safety, security of MPs when they're away from Westminster?
Well, that's right, Ben, and I think it's a real issue here, and I think the dilemma is summed up by the Home Secretary, Priti Patel, who today said MPs cannot be cowed because an open society requires them to be open and accessible. We spoke to one constituency worker today who told us that he'd actually urged Sir David to have security around him because you never know what may happen, and Sir David had taken that advice on board and understood the concerns of the constituency worker, but said, if I have security around me, how can I be approachable? And it's that approachability that made him such a loved figure here in the community and why so many people have been laying flowers. This afternoon, some of that grief will be seen in two events. There's going to be a vigil in the town and later in the recreation centre for the community to come together and remember an MP they dearly loved.
Dominic, for now, thank you very much. In other news, an investigation has been launched after a soldier died during a military exercise on Salisbury Plain. Our correspondent James Reynolds is with me now. James, what more do we know?
We know that the soldier was 23 years old. He has not been named in public. We also know that he died yesterday at about midday. The Wiltshire police are leading a joint investigation. They say he was part of a crew operating an armoured vehicle and was taking part in a military exercise on Salisbury Plain training area around the village of Enford. Now, the Army is taking part in that investigation as well as the Health and Safety Executive. The Ministry of Defence has said earlier today that it cannot comment any further because of that ongoing joint investigation. Just to put what happened into context, the MOD's own statistics show that between January 2000 and August 2021, there were 150 UK military deaths in training or exercise in total. And that includes all causes of death, including illness and disease.
OK, James, thank you. James Reynolds there. The United States has said it's offered financial compensation to relatives of 10 people who were mistakenly killed by a drone strike in the Afghan capital, Kabul, 2 months ago. An aid worker and 9 members of his family, including 7 children, were killed in that attack. The boss of Britain's 4th biggest supermarket, Morrison's, has said that labour shortages are delaying new store openings and products reaching the shelves. David Potts told the Times newspaper that more visas were needed for foreign workers. Now, that warning comes after the government announced a series of measures aimed at reducing pressure on supply chains. Our business correspondent Katie Austin reports.
The global supply chain is under huge strain as economies reawaken. Once imported products reach the UK, a shortage of lorry drivers means containers are often getting delayed at ports.
When you have a shortage of labour in terms of HGV drivers, those domestic drivers, it means that the goods is sitting around slightly longer at the ports waiting to be collected. And there is a bit of pressure at that on that sector at the moment right now.
There are labour shortages in other sectors too, including construction, hospitality and food production. Now the boss of Morrison's has said that while there are plenty of products on the shelves, underlying strain in the supply chain is affecting availability, while a lack of materials such as cement and bricks is delaying investment in new shops and refurbishments. He called for more visas for foreign workers. To ease the pressure, particularly in the run-up to Christmas, the government has already offered temporary visas for some meat workers and 5,000 for drivers. After only 20 applied, it's planning on letting overseas drivers do more deliveries when they're on UK soil. But some British hauliers fear their wages will now be undercut.
They want to make drivers' conditions better, they want to increase pay. We're now going to introduce a free-for-all of foreign hauliers to come and take all of our work away from us.
The government says immigration isn't the long-term answer to filling Britain's record number of vacancies. It wants to develop a high-skilled, high-wage economy. Some businesses say they still need a better short-term fix. Katie Austin, BBC News.
NASA has successfully launched its first mission to study Jupiter's Trojan asteroids, two vast clusters of space rocks that surround the planet. Scientists believe they're made up of matter that formed the solar system's outer planets, as Aruna Iyengar reports.
3, 2, 1, 0.
The Lucy probe is on its way to Jupiter.
Liftoff. Atlas V takes flight. Sending Lucy to one.
It's on a 12-year mission to study asteroids called Trojans, left over from the beginning of the universe.
So what are the Trojan asteroids? They're asteroids that orbit with Jupiter around the Sun that ultimately hold the clues to the formation of our solar system.
The Lucy probe will visit 8 Trojans, city-sized lumps of rock.
We'll really better understand all about the asteroids. So if you only see one, maybe you got sort of a bit of a funny one, right? But by seeing 8, you get to really understand what's going on in this population.
The probe is named after the fossil Lucy, discovered in Africa in 1974, which taught us about where our species came from. This new mission takes inspiration from that name. Scientists are hoping it will show us proof of a massive reorganisation of matter shortly after the solar system's formation. Aruna Iyengar, BBC News.
There is much more on all of today's stories on the BBC News channel. The next news on BBC One is at 5:15. But bye-bye for now.